There is a quiet power that begins to move through a life when forgiveness becomes its foundation. Not the forgiveness that says, "I am the better one," nor the kind that demands acknowledgement or apology, but the kind that arises from understanding, an understanding so deep it transforms the way we see reality itself. Forgiveness, in its truest form, is not a virtue to be achieved. It is a vision, a way of seeing beyond appearances into the holiness that has never been lost. The world has taught us that forgiveness is difficult, that it is an act of generosity we must struggle to give. But perhaps the difficulty comes not from forgiveness itself, but from the way we misunderstand what needs forgiving. We think we are asked to overlook something that really happened, to ignore injustice, to excuse betrayal, to make peace with pain. Yet true forgiveness, as the mystics have always said, is not denial, it is clarity. It does not say nothing happened, it says, what happened cannot touch what is real. It is the mind's return to innocence, not naivete, but remembrance. Imagine, for a moment, that behind every face you see, every voice you hear, every story of failure and sin you carry, there is a radiant core untouched by time. This is the truth of who we are, the part of us that has never been wounded and has never wounded another. Forgiveness is not the polishing of our pain, it is the decision to see that radiant core again, in others and in ourselves. For centuries, forgiveness has been framed as a heroic act, the noble saint who lets go of anger while knowing the other deserves it. The moral person who suppresses resentment because it is the right thing to do, but that kind of forgiveness carries an unspoken arrogance. It says, "You are guilty, but I will rise above your guilt." That is not forgiveness. That is subtle judgment wrapped in virtue. Real forgiveness is different. It begins when we question the very foundation of our perception. What if the guilt we see in another is not their reality but our own projection? What if the act we call sin is merely a symptom of forgetting? The Course in Miracles calls this miraculous forgiveness, a forgiveness not born of pity or moral superiority, but of vision. Miraculous forgiveness does not fight reality, it redefines it. It says, "I forgive because I see the truth that nothing real has been harmed." It no longer tries to be kind against reason. It discovers that kindness is reason itself. It does not contradict what is real, it reveals it. We are not asked to condone pain or pretend it did not occur. We are asked to look through it, to see past the body's gestures and words to the eternal being beneath. Because if what we see with our eyes were the full story, forgiveness would indeed be unjustified. But there is another sight, the eye of spirit, that perceives a deeper dimension, a world where innocence has never been lost, only obscured. Every day, we are given chances to practice this vision. The moment someone disappoints us, we can pause and remember, their true self is not the one reacting before me. The part that hurt me is not real in the eternal sense. It is a shadow cast by fear, and fear, once seen clearly, dissolves back into love. Forgiveness, then, is not something we perform once and complete. It is a discipline of perception, a daily practice of returning to truth. Like muscles trained in a gym, the heart strengthens through repetition. Each moment of letting go is a representative in the soul's workout. The more we practice, the more natural it becomes to see innocence where the world sees guilt. In time, forgiveness becomes not a task but a way of life. You start to notice your reactions changing. What once provoked resentment now stirs compassion. What once felt personal begins to feel symbolic. Another lesson in the classroom of peace. The Course in Miracles is often described as a course in forgiveness because it sees this practice as the central theme of salvation. It is not a small topic among many. It is the very heart of awakening. It is how the mind heals itself, how the world is undone, how heaven is remembered. Forgiveness is not just one rung on the ladder. It is the ladder itself. To forgive is to walk the path home, not because you become morally superior, but because you become sane. Because in the light of forgiveness, perception is healed. The mind that no longer condemns another is free to stop condemning itself. There is something profoundly humbling about this realization. For years, many of us have practiced forgiveness as a self-help technique to lighten our emotional load, to feel less burdened. But real forgiveness is not self-centered. It is other-centered. It is for them. And in the act of forgiving them, we discover we were forgiving ourselves all along. That is the paradox at the heart of divine forgiveness. You cannot give it without receiving it, because there is only one mind here. To heal one corner of perception is to heal the whole. That is why every act of forgiveness, no matter how small, reverberates through the fabric of creation. It restores to the universe a little of its forgotten wholeness. Yet the ego resists this simplicity. It insists that forgiveness must be earned, that guilt must first be confessed, that the offender must repent. It believes love must be conditional to be fair. But fairness in the eyes of God has nothing to do with balance sheets of pain. It has to do with truth, and truth is unconditional. The Course says that forgiveness is justified because what is forgiven was never real. This is the hardest idea for the mind to grasp, because we are so invested in the world's drama of wrongs and rights. But imagine this: if what you think another did is not their true identity, then to hold it against them is to believe in a lie. And who suffers more? The one who made the mistake, or the one who insists on remembering it? Unforgiveness is the real punishment. It is the acid that burns in the mind, the invisible weight carried through every day. It masquerades as righteousness, but poisons the soul. The Course calls the unforgiving mind, full of fear, sad without hope, seeing danger everywhere. It is not forgiving that costs us peace. It is holding on to grievance that drains it away. Forgiveness, then, is not a gift to the undeserving. It is a release from our own imprisonment. Each time we forgive, we loosen the bars of perception that keep us trapped in the past. We begin to realize that our brother's mistakes were never chains around us. They were mirrors showing where we still believed in guilt. This is why forgiveness cannot be rushed. It must be practiced again and again, patiently, like breathing. Each time you revisit the same person, the same wound, you may see a little more light. The process is cumulative, invisible at first but eventually undeniable. The day comes when you look at the one you once resented and feel nothing but calm. Not triumph, not relief. Just quiet recognition. We were never separate. That moment is grace, and grace is the real miracle. It does not arrive like thunder or revelation. It dawns like morning. Softly, inevitably, until there is no darkness left to resist it. You do not achieve forgiveness. You remember it, because the capacity to forgive is woven into your being. It is who you are when you stop pretending to be something smaller. Forgiveness is not about fixing the past. It is about freeing the present. It is the realization that the past no longer exists, except as a story the mind keeps rehearsing. Each time we recall what someone did, we breathe life into ghosts. We recreate pain that no longer lives outside our imagination. And yet, within that same mind that clings to suffering lies the key to its release. The past is over. It can touch me not. These words are not wishful thinking. They are a law of consciousness. The past cannot reach you because you are not there anymore. The only place it lives is in your insistence upon remembering it. When we refuse to release a grievance, we are not preserving justice, we are preserving illusion. To forgive, then, is not to rewrite history, but to see that the soul has no history. It has no record of wrongs, no scars of time. It is eternal presence, unchanged by anything that occurs within the dream of the world. When you look at another and say, "Your soul has no history," you are naming the truth. You are speaking from the vision of God. We are not being asked to deny what we see, but to see beyond it. The eyes of the body will always show us form, gestures, words, failures, but the eyes of the spirit perceive essence, the radiant being that remains untouched beneath all mistakes. Forgiveness is the bridge between those two kinds of sight. It allows the light of spirit to reinterpret the shadows of perception. At first, this feels impossible. The mind wants to hold on to its judgments because judgment feels like control. But control is just fear disguised as logic. When you let go of judgment, you do not lose power, you regain peace. And in peace, perception becomes holy. This is why forgiveness must be practiced. It is not enough to understand it intellectually. It must be lived, breathed, repeated. Each moment of irritation, each resentment that resurfaces, each judgment that tempts you to harden your heart. These are invitations to exercise the muscle of mercy. Little by little, the repetitions add up. The soul becomes strong enough to lift even the heaviest burdens of the past. At first, the changes seem small. You forgive someone but still feel a residue of pain. You release a grievance, only to have it return in the quiet of night. But just like waves shaping a stone, each act of forgiveness smooths the rough edges of perception. And one day, what once felt unmovable simply isn't there anymore. You look within and realize, peace has replaced the struggle. The Course in Miracles does not ask for one dramatic act of holiness. It asks for steady, faithful practice, a willingness to see differently, again and again. Forgiveness, it says, is learned through repetition. Every time you overlook an error, you strengthen your connection to reality. Every time you look for the loving thought behind a harsh word, you train your mind to see as Spirit sees. This cumulative effect is not visible day to day, but it is real. Over time, the mind grows lighter. You begin to notice that the world feels less threatening. Your thoughts soften. Your speech becomes gentler. The inner noise that once demanded constant attention begins to fade into silence. And that silence is not emptiness. It is peace. Many imagine that enlightenment arrives through one grand revelation, a sudden burst of divine vision. But in truth, enlightenment is built through many quiet moments of forgiveness. Each one clears a little space in the mind until light fills it entirely. Forgiveness is the slow sunrise of awakening. Still, resistance appears. The ego insists some things are too terrible to forgive. It wants to keep a hierarchy of sins, the small ones we can overlook, and the unforgivable ones we cannot. But love knows no hierarchy. It cannot say, I forgive this but not that, because love does not see degrees of error. It sees only the truth beneath them, the eternal innocence that cannot be harmed. There is a point in practice when this understanding moves from concept to experience. You look upon someone who once caused you deep pain and realize they are light. Not metaphorically, but literally. Light in your awareness. Their image, once burdened by guilt and history, becomes radiant. The forgiveness is complete because you have seen the truth. There was nothing to forgive. That is the most radical teaching of all, that forgiveness is unnecessary once perception is healed, because there was no real offense, only mistaken seeing. You forgive the Son of God for what he did not do, and in that vision your mind becomes as innocent as his. This does not mean we pretend harm is not felt. The Course does not ask for denial, it asks for reinterpretation. When you are hurt, you do not lie to yourself. You feel the pain, and then you ask, what does this pain want to teach me about my own perception? Pain is not punishment, it is feedback. It reveals where the mind is still choosing separation. And once you see that, the pain becomes a teacher instead of a tormentor. Through forgiveness, perception becomes inclusive. The person who wronged you is no longer other. Their errors become your classroom, their healing becomes your healing. And in that shared redemption, the boundaries between self and other begin to fade. This is why the Course says that forgiveness is for them, not merely for your own relief. Because to see their innocence is to confirm your own. You do not forgive to be kind, you forgive to be true. Every time you choose to bless rather than condemn, you affirm the wholeness that joins you both. Forgiveness reveals the law of unity hidden beneath the illusion of separation. It is the recognition that there is only one of us here, appearing as many. To forgive another is to awaken to that oneness. And to awaken is to remember God. In the beginning, this may sound abstract, but the experience is profoundly practical. Relationships begin to change. Conversations soften. Even the world itself feels different. Colors brighter, air lighter, life gentler. The shift is not in the world, but in your vision of it. Forgiveness is the undoing of fear. And where fear ends, love begins to guide perception. The more you practice forgiveness, the less you need to protect yourself. Because you start to realize there was never anything to protect against. Love is the only reality, and love cannot be attacked. To live in this awareness is not to escape the world, but to see it anew. You still walk through the same streets, speak to the same people, face the same challenges, but the meaning of everything changes. The world becomes a mirror of your healed perception. Every encounter becomes sacred. Every grievance becomes an opportunity to remember truth. Forgiveness is not about becoming good, it is about becoming free. Free from guilt, from resentment, from the tyranny of the past. It liberates both the forgiver and the forgiven, revealing they were never separate to begin with. It is the undoing of every story the ego ever told. And what remains once the stories are gone is love, silent, self-evident, infinite. Forgiveness begins as a decision, but it matures into a way of seeing. In the early stages, it feels like something we must do, a spiritual task that demands effort and discipline. But as the mind softens, forgiveness ceases to be a verb. It becomes a state of being, a constant awareness that only love is real, and in that awareness, the old impulse to judge simply falls away. The heart no longer scans the world for guilt. It looks instead for opportunities to remember wholeness. It listens beneath the words for the music of truth still playing in every soul. Even when someone lashes out, even when misunderstanding erupts, a quiet knowing whispers, "This, too, is a chance to love." At this level, forgiveness does not even feel like forgiveness. It feels like vision. You begin to see others as light clothed in temporary forms. Their anger, their fears, their mistakes, all of it becomes transparent. You are no longer fooled by the shadow, you see the sun behind it. And because you recognize the same light within yourself, you respond not with defense, but with grace. There is profound simplicity in this way of living. You stop rehearsing the past. You stop imagining the future as an arena of payback or redemption. You rest in the present, where only peace exists. The past loses its meaning, not because it is dismissed, but because it is integrated. You see now that every pain was a teacher leading you back to love. Even the hardest moments become holy in hindsight. When you forgive deeply, you realize that nothing was ever wasted. Every conflict that once tore you apart becomes a thread in the tapestry of awakening. The people who hurt you most become silent allies in your remembering. They played their roles perfectly in the curriculum of your soul. To forgive them is to honor your own learning. The ego resists this view because it thrives on opposition. It believes forgiveness means losing power, surrendering identity, erasing justice. But what the ego calls weakness, the spirit recognizes as strength. Forgiveness does not erase boundaries. It redefines them in light. It allows you to say no without hatred, to walk away without resentment, to stand firm without fear. Because love does not mean passivity, it means clarity. To forgive is to see that nothing real can be threatened. That simple truth becomes the foundation of peace. You no longer need to protect yourself from the world, because the world itself is your reflection. When you perceive it through love, it becomes a mirror of safety. You walk unarmored through chaos, yet remain untouched. This is not denial, it is mastery. The Course speaks of two minds, the unforgiving mind and the forgiving mind. The unforgiving mind sees a dangerous world, full of traps and enemies. It suffers in its own projections, believing that attack comes from without. But the forgiving mind knows that what it perceives is its own creation. It releases the need to control, because it no longer believes in separation. Its peace is not dependent on circumstances, it flows from awareness itself. This is the transformation forgiveness offers. It is not merely emotional relief. It is a shift in the architecture of consciousness. The mind that once defended now blesses. The heart that once feared now radiates. And from this radiance, a new world emerges. Not because the old world changed, but because the perceiver did. Imagine waking each morning and feeling no residue of yesterday. No echo of regret, no burden of memory, just a quiet certainty that everything is forgiven, and therefore everything is new. That is what it means to live in the present. It is not about savoring sensations, it is about recognizing timelessness. To be in the present is to dwell in eternity. You begin to realize that the true meaning of heaven on earth is not a place. It is a perception. It is what the world looks like through forgiving eyes. When you look with those eyes, every person is your friend. Every event serves your awakening, and even what the world calls loss becomes an act of grace. Forgiveness restores what guilt took away: connection. It closes the gap between you and the rest of existence. It ends the lonely dream of being separate from God, from life, from love. In that reunion, you feel a joy so still, it hums like silence. It is the peace that passes understanding, not because it cannot be known, but because it cannot be explained. There will still be moments when old thoughts return. Habits of blame resurface, subtle judgments slip through. But now you recognize them as echoes of a dream already over. You no longer identify with them. You simply notice, smile, and release. You say quietly, "I choose again." And in that choice, the mind realigns with truth. Some people will not understand this path. They will call it unrealistic, naive, impossible. But forgiveness was never meant to please the world. It is meant to heal it. It is the only thing strong enough to stop the cycle of pain. And it begins not on battlefields or in governments, but in a single mind willing to see differently. The Course teaches that forgiveness is the key to happiness. Not wealth, not success, not even knowledge, just forgiveness. Because happiness is not the result of acquiring, but of releasing. The more you let go, the lighter you become. And one day, the burden of judgment simply falls away. You stand in stillness, weightless, free. In that freedom, love reveals itself as what it always was. It is not something you find. It is what remains when nothing else is left. It is the quiet presence beneath all appearances, the current beneath all thoughts. When you rest in that presence, forgiveness is no longer a practice. It is your nature. The mystics of every age have tried to describe this state. Some called it enlightenment, others awakening, still others union. But words can only point to it. Forgiveness is how we approach it, step by gentle step, until we realize we never left. The ladder was never outside of us. It rose from within. The final stage of forgiveness is gratitude. Gratitude for the lessons, for the challenges, for the souls who mirrored our fears so we could finally see them. Gratitude for the hidden perfection in every imperfection. Gratitude even for the ego, which served as the backdrop against which love could be remembered. When gratitude arises spontaneously, forgiveness has completed its work. There is nothing mystical about this completion. It is profoundly ordinary. It is the moment you look at another human being, perhaps one who once hurt you, and see only light. You cannot even recall the grievance clearly. It dissolves like smoke in sunlight. What remains is recognition. We are the same. Not similar, not connected, the same. That recognition is salvation. It is the return of sanity to the dreaming mind. The Course says that forgiveness is our way home because it mirrors the reality of heaven, where no grievance exists. Heaven is not a place beyond death. It is a state of perfect inclusion. And forgiveness is how we begin to live that state now. So when the world wounds you, remember, you have not been asked to bear the unbearable. You have been invited to see the unreal as unreal. To see through error into essence. To see that nothing has truly happened to alter what you are. This is the secret of peace. It is not learned in theory, but revealed through practice. Every time you choose to look with gentle eyes, the veil thins a little more. Until one day, there is no veil left, only light looking at light. Forgiveness is not the end of the journey, it is the journey itself. It is the practice, the process, the path, and the promise. It is how we walk each other home. And when we finally arrive, we will realize we never traveled anywhere. We simply remembered what was always true. Love cannot be lost, and nothing real can be threatened. That is the peace of God.